And we're now recording. Good evening, everybody. We're meeting tonight with Joanne Mattera, and I don't know that Joanne and I have ever met, but I've certainly been following her career as an artist and her writing as a blogger and her posting on Facebook, and I'm not sure that she's ever posted something that I haven't agreed with. Oh. And that's kind of scary. So I want to find, we're going to look for areas of disagreement.
Okay.
So Joanne,
yeah.
Good evening. Welcome to this group of Klein-Artist-Works artists. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you just fine. I cannot see you. Did you turn your camera on? Would you turn your camera on?
Camera.
To the right of your name, I believe, is an icon that turns your camera on.
The right of my name.
In the list, underneath the picture of me.
Yes, there it is.
Okay, good.
Okay. Here I am.
All right, wonderful. So, where did you grow up?
I grew up just north of Boston, or as they say there, north of Boston.
Yep.
And I went to Mass College of Art in Boston.
And how far away from there do you live now?
Well, interestingly, I'm about 20 miles from Boston now, 25 miles, but I toggle between here, Salem, Massachusetts, where I bought a building in which I have my studio and a loft, and Manhattan, where I lived full-time for 20 years, and so I'm still there part-time in a small rental.
Let's talk about that later, the advantages and disadvantages of being in Manhattan and New York City.
Yeah.
And you went, all right, so you went to high school and college in Massachusetts. You pretty much was a Massachusetts gal, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. And when did you realize you were an artist?
Being an artist was not an option for an Italian-American child living in Revere, Massachusetts. But I had two unmarried aunts, Lena and Antonina Mishi, who taught me. I became their surrogate daughter, the daughter they never had. And they taught me all of the things they had learned in Italy: hand sewing, machine sewing, knitting, embroidery, lace making. And so I learned to be creative, not through paint or conventional art making materials, but through textile materials and techniques. So I did that my whole life. And when I got to high school, I had an art teacher who encouraged me. She encouraged me to go to Mass College of Art. I did. And my life was changed. Everything that I had been doing as a child, I realized that I could translate into these more conventional art-making materials of paint and so forth.
Have you ever embraced those childhood materials in your adult career?
Yes, thank you for asking. I think that my work has a textile sensibility. For me, the grid is very much connected to the warp and the weft of textiles. And I did at one point do a little bit of weaving and stuff, but that was not for me. Painting was it, but the connection to textile is very much part of my work.
Are you painting in oil or acrylic?
I work mostly in encaustic, which is pigmented wax, but when I do painting, conventional paint, it's typically acrylic.
What do you like about the encaustic?
The materiality of it, the process of it, the luminosity that I can achieve through it, and the depth and substance that I can achieve with it.
Did you get a graduate degree when you came out of college?
For 6 years, no. I lived in the country, I went back to the land, I drove a truck, I picked vegetables, all the kinds of things you did when you graduated from art school in 1970, because frankly with the B.F.A, I was prepared to do absolutely nothing. And I think this is, something that happens to many artists. And so
there wasn't an MFA at that time, was there? When did MFA start?
It was just starting, and
Okay.
the idea was you should have, this was 1976 now I'm thinking, or 75, should I get a degree? And we were just starting a discussion about this master's degree. Could you get an MA in visual art? Did it have to be an MFA, the terminal degree? So I opted for an MA in visual art from Goddard College, primarily because it was a low residency and I could do it while I was supporting myself.
How were you supporting yourself at the time?
I had a pickup truck and I did moving and hauling for the gay community in Albany, New York.
Okay, cool. And were you making art then?
Yes, I was. I had rented a storefront space in Albany, New York. I shared the space with another artist. I made art from the moment, continuing from the moment I left art school to this very moment.
When did you have your first successes?
Boy, that's a great question because, when we're
some of it has to do with definition.
Yeah, when we're just starting out, having a show anywhere is a huge success. Getting any kind of critical attention is a huge success. But I have to say that my first success didn't come for probably 20 years, in terms of being able to show. And I started showing with Stephen Haller in New York City. And from there, once you get a gallery somewhere, other people become interested in you. And so it was having that affiliation that in 1995, so that's a good 20 years after art school, that I felt that I had my real first success.
How did the relationship with Stephen Haller begin?
The relationship began probably in 1990 when I would make my rounds of the galleries in Soho, which then was the center of the art world. And I went, every Saturday I went to the galleries, and I really got familiar with each of the galleries. I targeted galleries whose aesthetic, whose program I really liked. I spent time chatting with the dealers, not in a, in a kind of Eddie Haskell way, but, in a way that was, that I wanted them to know that I was engaged with their program. And I think there's so much bullshit, when people are going into galleries and trying to hustle a dealer, that when someone is really just having a conversation with them, they respond. And at a certain point, he said to me, "Are you an artist? What kind of work do you do?" And, so here was this window, and I just dove through it, and I talked about my work. And he said, "Well, show me your work sometime." And
this is exactly the prescription that I describe as ideal for an artist to begin a relationship. And I need to point out that you and I didn't rehearse this.
But it's so logical, isn't it? This is.
I think so.
Yeah, this is. When I teach, I used to teach at Mass College of Art for several semesters. And, I used to say that it's like dating, that you don't go up to someone and say, let's get married, let's have children, let's move to Connecticut. There's a conversation that happens.
You notice, can you see the people all smiling? Because I use the analogy of dating all the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do.
I see you. I can't see the others.
If you go to the middle-sized screen, you can see 5 people underneath at a time. And then you can scroll through those if you want to.
Oh, I'd love to. Now, the middle-sized screen, I have no idea where that is.
All right, so if you're looking at the smallest screen in the upper right-hand corner, you click on the postage stamp.
The group. Yes, you told me that. There you are. There you are. Hi, everyone. Now I can see you.
But they're not smiling any. Oh, some of them are.
Some of them are, yeah.
So, yeah, so it's like dating, and I don't know. I'm on my 3rd successful marriage. And
dating.
Yes, I do. So, but I'm not, I wonder if I'd had one long, successful marriage, if I would have had a different analogy. I don't know.
Well, but you know,
But to me,
I would say that the thing is that this is really, and you would confirm this, I would hope, this is really an interpersonal relationship that artists and dealers have with one another. We may not end up being best buds and going on vacation together, but we have a real relationship. And, you know, so that's all of the stuff that we do before our painting gets on the wall is part of that relationship that happens.
that's the other buzzword I use all the time. See what I mean? It's really annoying how much Joanne and I agree, even though we, you know, all right, can we try to disagree
Well,
on
we've been in
something?
the business for a long time.
All right, so how long did the relationship with Stephen Haller last?
It lasted for 5 years as an artist-dealer relationship, but I am pleased to say that Stephen remains a friend. He has been a mentor. In fact, I just saw a video of him. He had some very serious water damage in his gallery for the flood. But we have remained friends all of this time. It just, the hardest thing I ever did was leaving his gallery, and I just felt that I was not right for him and he was not right for me as artist-gallery relationship, but as a dear friend, that relationship endures.
You know, I think those of you who are pursuing New York galleries need to know, like Stephen Haller, and Joanne just posted something, the video she's talking about this morning, and in it he says that he hopes to be back up and running in 2 months. And I would imagine that in the next 2 months, it's not particularly a good time to try and create a relationship cold with an art dealer in New York, yeah, especially if they were underwater. All right, so when you, here's something I never have figured out. When you left the gallery, did you have a green pasture landing spot to move to? Did you establish another relationship?
No.
You just, so you're the kind of gal that's more serial monogamy, one at a time?
Well, let me say that largely as a result of the relationship that I had with Stephen, I joined 2 other galleries, the Marcia Wood Gallery in Atlanta and Arden Gallery in Boston. I'm still with those 2 galleries. And so although I left the New York gallery, I didn't completely, when I jumped off the cliff, there was a cushion there. I was able to continue showing. And, you know, I know that a lot of friends thought I was completely crazy to do it, but I felt that we were not right. He was not giving me what I needed as an artist, and I don't think I was giving him what he needed from his artist. And, you know, so it made sense to be able to leave and find something else for myself, which I did do more or less.
So are you comfortable with having made that decision, albeit a while ago?
Yes, although I have to say, when I walked into Chelsea and saw his new gallery, and it's so beautiful, very theatrical with a room and then another room, and there are these almost kind of wings so that you see into the first gallery, into the second gallery, into the third gallery. I thought, oh, what did I do? But I knew I did what I had to do. I knew it was right. And what I realized also, and if you're, all of you, if you're looking for a gallery in New York, you know, one of the things that that I realized is that many dealers talk about monogamy, want a very serious commitment from you in terms of who you show with, where you show, when you show. And having been around for so many years, I felt that I didn't want to do that with another gallery. So I've remained a free agent in New York. I show here, I show there, a solo, a group show, and that's worked well.
Well, let's talk about that some more, because more than anything, this class is about strategy, mm-hmm, and, you know, doing what resonates and fulfilling one's objectives. Mm-hmm. So maybe the first thing is, what, you know, first of all, that's a painting of yours over your left shoulder. Yes?
Oh, yes, it is, yes.
Okay, yes. And as a visual artist, what do you think, what is your primary objective?
Well, my primary objective is to make good art in the studio. That's sort of the 50% of it. And then the other part of it is to get that work from the studio and out into the world. And for me, the way I do that is through gallery relationships. I know other artists may choose to do it in other ways, but for me, it's the gallery relationship.
Okay.
So those are my two goals: make it, sell it.
So when you say get it out into the world, you mean sell it?
Well, you know, I mean, that's part of it. I want to show it. I want to engage.
Yeah.
You know, I'm being facetious, but but only partly. I want the work to be seen. I want to engage with other artists, dealers, critics, curators about my work, what my work has, and I want to be part of the dialogue. And
okay.
And then the work does need to sell, because this is how I earn my living. If I were teaching, for instance, and I had a different kind of income, then selling would not be an important issue for me. But because this is how I earn my living, it is. I have to think about that.
Okay, let's talk about, all right, so you have relationships with multiple galleries in New York City.
Yes, yes.
And how is the work served, your artwork served by that? I mean, are they contacting you about exhibition possibilities? Are you contacting them, or both?
Both. You know, one of the things that happens in any artist's career is that when you start out, you are the one who is putting out all the time. You are
Correct.
preparing. You know, used to be slides, now it's digital images. You are presenting yourself to different galleries. After a certain point, after you've been showing a little bit and you've had some critical success and some visibility, you notice that something happens, which is that you get a phone call or an email one day and saying, would you consider being part of such and such show? And you think, oh, hey, that's nice. And then as you continue, you notice that these invitations to do things start coming more often. And when that happens, you realize that your career has taken a turn for the better, I think, because it means that all the time that you have been spending putting yourself out there, you can now spend on other things, refining what you're doing, you know, spending more time being out in the world and engaging with others about your work.
How many galleries in New York have you shown with in the past 5-10 years?
Well, I had 2 solo shows at OK Harris in '96 and in 2007, and I'm about to send a new batch of images to the gallery to say, hey, what do you think? I'm thinking that these would look great in the gallery with the gray walls. So it's not just now, what do you think, but I've actually got a location and I'm letting them know that. I've shown with Thatcher Projects, with Valerie McKenzie, with Elizabeth Harris Gallery. Oh, and I'm now sort of nominally with DM Contemporary Gallery in New York. So there are others I'm just not remembering at the moment.
And when you have a one-person show with somebody like OK Harris or one of these other galleries, how are the terms of that show, and how are what the gallery and the artist do different than if you were represented by the gallery?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. Well, I still have a contractual relationship with them, but for a shorter duration. So it's not in forever. It's not even for several years, but for 6 months after that show, any interest in that work, and they'll hold on to some, they will sell some work during the show, they'll hold on to some of that work for the next 6 months, but should I for any reason have it come back to me, if there is interest in that, I would make sure that the sale went through OK Harris. You know, if we're going to be out in the world and we're going to be having relationships with dealers, we work so hard to have a relationship with a dealer. The worst thing we can possibly do is after the minute we have an opportunity to sell work, to turn around and try to sell something, you know, behind your back. So I think it's really important for us to adhere to the terms of the agreement. And, you know, even when you show work on your website, for instance, if someone contacts me, I'll say, where did you see the work? Well, I saw it through, I saw your show at OK Harris, but I'd rather buy it from you. Well, you know what? I'd love for you to have a piece of my work, but you really have to make that purchase through OK Harris. It's just a fair and reasonable thing to do.
And you have a written contract when you've done shows with OK Harris.
Yes, but it's just for that 6-month period. But
but I bet you didn't have a written contract when you were represented by Stephen Haller.
I didn't know.
Interesting. Yeah.
But I don't remember actually, but I don't think so. But you know, this is
and these other gigs with DM and when you do something with Margaret or DM or Elizabeth, are those contractual?
Some are. For instance, I don't think it was with Elizabeth Harris. I don't think it was with Margaret Thatcher. I think it was just a gentlewoman's agreement. DM Contemporary wants, this is really entre nous here, folks.
Don't say it because, these might go out into the world. So maybe just, make it generic.
Well, they want a little, there's a gallery that wants a little more from me than I'm willing to give, a little more exclusivity than I'm willing to give. And so I said, I really love showing with you, and I love this particular dealer. She has exquisite taste. She's a lovely, lovely person, and she's got a wonderful gallery, but she wanted an exclusive throughout New York City and the region, the tri-state region. And I said, I can't do that. I have relationships with Kenise Barnes in Westchester and other places. So we sort of worked out an agreement whereby I would not do a solo show with this gallery, but I would do group shows. So, I guess a little lesson in there is that we have options and we just have to explore them as artists.
How long have you been writing a blog?
I've been writing this blog, the Joanne Mattera art blog, since 2006.
How many words have you written?
Oh, geez, I don't know. But, I just did, I do a monthly column called Marketing Mondays, and it's really about, what you all are talking about in the webinars and how we live our lives, basically, getting ourselves and our work out into the world. And I've done 165 of those.
Wow.
It's going to go monthly starting January, Marketing Monthly.
So, all right, so you're not charging for these?
No, I don't charge for these.
How many people are subscribing, do you think?
When I do the stats, and I have to say, for all these years I've been doing the blog, I'm probably not all that savvy about it. I get about 2,500 hits a day, so that's
a lot.
Pretty good for me.
That's a lot.
And I don't charge for it, but I have a PayPal, and I just say to people, if you like what you see, I would ask you for a $20 a year payment. Some people do, some people don't. Some people send me giant checks like $250. That kind of knocked my socks off. And other people somebody sent me $5 once and said, I can't afford to pay you a lot, but I love what you do, and please accept this. And I was very touched and pleased. So
why do you do this?
Boy, that's a good question, Paul.
I know, because if somebody asks me why I do my art letter, I don't know what I'd say. I mean, I'm just thinking, going, what would you say, Paul?
Why do you do your art letter? I mean, you have something to say. You want to share it. As an artist, I spend a lot of time in the studio alone. Facebook is fun, but there's something really wonderful about having a point of view, writing about it, and then getting feedback from that. Not in a Facebook kind of like way, but to really have a dialogue or a conversation with other readers, artists, critics, curators, dealers, people who just like art.
You're much more thorough than I am. I mean, you really delve into things. I sort of just, I'm much more of a cheerleader, just dancing across the tops of the waves.
You know what? One of the things I want to say to you is, damn it, tell me what gallery I'm looking at. Whose booth is that? Who's that artist?
Well, when it's the gallery thing I do, it's always the pictures follow the gallery I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
I post way too many pictures to go put up links to everybody and all the artists. It's just,
it's hard. It's
if
really
somebody
hard.
paid me, I could see doing it that way, but I don't see it happening. And I've never solicited any contributions, donations like you have. That's interesting. I mean, you get more hits than I have more subscribers and you get more hits.
Mm.
And I once tried to get some advertising, and somebody said, once you're at 250,000 hits a month, come back to us. And I went, oh, well.
Yeah.
So do you think that serves your career? Do you think it augments your art sales? Do you think, how does it affect you as a visual artist in terms of, I mean, you talk about how you want to interact in the studio as a lonely practice, and you get all that, but I want to know what it does for your career and what it does for your art.
Thank you for asking that. Well, it has served me well, I have to say. It has allowed me to be more visible, and if you happen to go onto my blog, you notice that on the sidebar, it's all Joanne all the time.
Right.
So it's what I'm doing now, where I'm showing new work, what's in the studio. So I'm giving to the community, but I also want the community to take a look at what I'm doing. I mentioned sometimes I say on the blog, I want to come back as a curator in my next life. Well, a curator read that and said, I like the posts that you curate on your blog. Why don't we consider doing a project together? We did. I co-curated a show called Textility at the Visual Arts Center of New Jersey. I got a fee for that. It was a wonderful experience working with the museum curator on this. So, the blog opens a pathway for things like that might not otherwise have happened. I get invitations to write, to teach, to do visiting artist gigs. Part of what we can do as artists is find ways to be visible, and that has given me a way to be visible, and so nice things have come, and paying things have come as a result. I mean, if you want to bring me up to Montana to be a visiting artist for a week, you got to pay up, and so that's one of the really great things that happens.
So do you feel like increasing your visibility, your personal visibility, increases sales of art in the long run? Just say yeah.
I don't know. I think it does. I mean, I think that all of this stuff moves the career forward. And so as it moves forward, all of those things happen. Sales happen and interaction happens. So yes, the short answer is yes.
I mean, I think so. As a result of the, just more people see you, more familiarity, getting yourself out of the studio, getting in front of people's faces, they like you, and then, they end up looking at the art and liking it as an extension of that. What are the kinds of things you do to augment your visibility?
Well, one of the things, there is Marketing Mondays. Are you talking about it in terms of the blog?
Yes, and everything else.
Okay. Yes,
I want to know what, do you tweet? You don't, do you?
I don't tweet. I just,
okay, so there's some things.
I have to draw the line, and
exactly.
I do it just before tweeting.
Fine, but for these folks in this course, there's a lot of things that people suggest, and I just want to use you as a case sample and say, these are the things you've done that you think work. These are the things I've never tried. These are the things I tried and jettisoned.
Well, I think Facebook is a fabulous vehicle. If you're not just don't post any more pictures of your damn cats. But beyond that, if your friends are artists and you pull artists into your friend group, then the discussions, and you know this, Paul, because I see Paul's name coming up all the time when I'm posting and I see what he's posting. If your friends are in the art world, artists, dealers, critics, curators, then there's a discussion that goes on, so that when you happen to meet someone in real life, and I can say, oh, hi, Dan Cameron, Joanne Mattera. He's a curator. He knows my name. We've Facebook chatted. So I think in that way, Facebook is a wonderful way to meet people physically, but also even just virtually. It's a great way to be in touch with others in our world, others who are not necessarily in our region, but who share some of the interests that we share. So
okay. That's
and
one.
I would say one other, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's Facebook.
Facebook.
Go on.
Well, obviously, you're still doing the other things that you've always done. You're still going to openings. You're still schmoozing.
Come on, how far away is Salem from Manhattan? About 90 minutes?
It's about 225 miles. So
that's over 90 minutes.
It's 4 hours.
Yeah. So how do you get there usually? By train or by car?
Oh, I drive, and I commute in chunks. So that I'll be in Manhattan, say, for 10 days, and then I'm in Salem right now, and then I'll come back to Salem, and I will spend 10 days or 2 weeks in the studio, and then I'll drive back down to Manhattan again. You know, a lot of my time in Manhattan is dictated by what's going on and what I want to do there, whereas Salem is where my studio is, so you know, I just want to be here to be in the studio. But there are specific things that go on in Manhattan that I want to participate in.
Would you stay with a friend?
I have a place that I rent there. Beautiful.
And a lot of what you're going out to is something where you get to be seen and you think it's good, and some of it is, I really like this lecture that I want to hear. It sort of falls into those two camps.
I didn't get the second part. We had a little.
Oh, I'm sorry. The first part is things where you think it's good for you to be seen. The second part is because you have a personal interest in whatever's happening. You know, and sometimes it's the same thing.
Yeah, and often, I mean, so much of our lives are intertwined. So I would say that for the most part, it's those two things together. There's sort of an informal group of women artists over 50 that I convene whenever I'm around, and I just say, come on, let's meet it, and we meet at a Chinese restaurant downtown, and we have dinner. And it's just a chance to network a little bit and share information, because, you know, we've all gotten very good at dealing with the sexism in the art world, but then you reach a certain point, a certain age, and suddenly, whomp, there's this other layer of stuff you got to deal with. And so by meeting, it's just a really nice, supportive thing that we do that's very informal.
What other kinds of things do you do? All right, so you do the Facebook, you do some new media, you do the in-person things, and you go to openings, and you go to shows, and you go to museums. What else do you do that might gain exposure for your art? I don't know that I could come up with something else either, but I'm just want to, you know.
No, a big thing is that, you know, I work in this medium of encaustic, which for 2,000 years was unknown to humans because it was all entombed in the Egyptian burial sites. And then Jasper Johns and a few other people resurrected it, and it got this visibility. Had he not become famous, I think, you know, encaustic would still be in some other netherworld, but he became famous in part because of this medium. So I wrote a book. Do you have a question? Oh.
I don't.
No.
Go ahead.
Okay.
We'll take questions in a moment.
I wrote this book called The Art of Encaustic Painting. And in 2000, it was published in 2001, and it was the first book on the topic in 50 years. And so everybody who, I'll show it to you, everybody who works in this medium, has this book. So they knew me from this. And so one of the things I did in 2007, because I got so many, can you see me okay?
Yeah, it's all good.
Are we okay?
Yes.
Okay. so many people were emailing with questions, technical and aesthetic questions, that I decided to found this conference for encaustic painting that takes place in Provincetown, Massachusetts every June. And everything, both among my peers and then in other venues.
Okay, cool. This has generated sales, you think?
Yeah, I think it's generated sales because I make sure that I invite dealers, critics, curators, and other folks to the conference. And yes, I think it does.
Has the conference increased in attendance or stayed the same, do you think?
It started out with 140 people in 2007, and it's now up to about 250 people. So it's just big enough to have a nice critical mass, but small enough that it's still relatively intimate. Over a period of 3 days, you can really get to talk with everyone that you want to talk with.
That's cool. Oh, you guys, you got some questions out there? Raise your hands. I got one more, and then I'm turning to you guys to keep me going. How often do you publish something in your blog?
Well, I do Marketing Monday, so I know that has to take place on Monday. And then I do at least one a post, usually on Wednesday, and then I try to do something short on Saturday.
So you're doing like 3 times a week?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you go to the art fair, and then you write something that's like 15 miles of length, and you discuss everything really thoroughly. Do you think
the art fair is a magnum opus going to Miami? And by the way, I would say, where are you all? Where are you all living?
Most of these people are in Chicago. There's somebody here in England. There's somebody in Texas. There's somebody in the Northwest. There's somebody in California. A couple of people in California. There are people who are taking the course and only doing the recordings or elsewhere. I think I've hit the high points. If somebody's insulted that I left out your locale, unmute yourself and scream it out.
Well, I asked because I would say, how many of you have been to an art fair?
That's a good question. Raise your hand if you've been to an art fair. We have an art fairs in Chicago that a lot of people.
I know, yeah.
So.
And you've got Frieze in London, and depending on where you are, Seattle just had an affordable art fair. If you're in the Northwest, I mean, anywhere you are at this point, there's an art fair. I think they're really great opportunities to go to get a sense of, it's sort of a, you get to take the temperature of the art world. Who's showing? What are they showing? What's interesting? Are you seeing one artist who's in more than one gallery? What are the prices? What are the prices, for instance, if you're trying to figure out how to price your own work and you're seeing other artists at various levels, professional levels, what are their prices? I mean, you can go to be aesthetically fulfilled, but you can go for, a lot of work-related issues. How are things priced? Who's showing where? What is their program? Are they friendly? Are they outgoing? You really get a sense of all of those things when you go to an art fair.
Yep, you do. All right. Lynn, did you have a question?
Yes. Hi, Joanne. Thank you for speaking with us.
Hi.
Hi. I was wondering, you were talking about how when you show your work at a gallery, you have a show, and then afterwards you would still share some of the process. Sorry.
That's okay.
Ali says hi. You share some of the process with that gallery. I was wondering, if like all the work doesn't sell in that show, what do you do with it afterwards? Would you ever give it to another gallery after a certain period of time, or does it just go on your website and store it?
Well, I try to keep the work out of my studio. I try to keep it out in the world because it's going to be seen and sold if it's out in the world. So if I have a show at Gallery A and they make a few sales, but they still have a lot of the work left over after the show, different dealers do things differently. For instance, one dealer will say, I can sell this entire show, but it's going to take me 2 years. And I know that's true because that's how she's worked. So I know that she's just going to keep that work for 2 years and she's going to sell it. Another dealer might sell nothing during a show, and maybe she's going to sell one piece. And so after 6 months, whatever we have worked out in the contract, usually it's 6 months, then I'm going to take most of that work back and I'm going to place it elsewhere. I want to leave a few pieces with her so that in case someone who saw the show wants to come back, but I want to try to keep moving it. You know, this is when it becomes inventory and not just art. I mean, we make the art from, you know, our intellect, our heart, our spirit, our gut, whatever. But when it goes out into the world, I have to say, it becomes inventory and you got to move it around. Does that answer your question?
Let me unmute again. Oh, she is unmuted. Do you have a follow-up on that, Lynn? Do you want to ask me more about it?
No, I don't think so. That's really interesting to hear. I mean, I've seen artists who, I mean, they're not the same caliber as you. They're younger, but you know, I see their work in different shows, the same work everywhere. I was wondering how someone like you does it, and so that's really interesting to hear the different options.
But I wouldn't want to put the same work from one show. I wouldn't want to import a whole show and then bring it to another gallery. I mean, you know, you work with the dealer, you figure out, you can say, well, I have a few pieces from another show. They might decide they want to put those pieces maybe in the back room. So they're still there so that if a client is interested, but most dealers do tend to want new work, and I don't blame them. They want new work for a show. So it's, you know, they might want to keep some of those pieces from Gallery A at Gallery B, but Gallery B has them in the inventory. They're not likely to be part of a, say, a solo show. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because you want to keep it moving, but you also want to keep it fresh.
Cool. Good. Thank you both. Karen, go ahead. Glad you made it in. Sorry you had a problem.
Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Karen.
Your art resonates with me. I like it a lot, and I do some things a little bit similar to you. I was wondering if you could describe, if this is possible, a typical client for contemporary art, and if there's any part of the country that it's more popular, and also what sizes might be popular.
Okay, let's see. This is a great question, and I think that every artist you ask will have a different answer. Speaking for myself, I work with a network of galleries around the country. Right now, San Francisco has been doing really well, and Larchmont, New York has been doing really well. Boston, not so much. New York, not so much. But that could change in 6 months. I don't know why that is. It's just, I don't know. It's, you know, it's not like these are socks and it's winter and so someone has to get a pair of socks. I mean, so it's, I don't know if there's an answer for why that happens. I tend to work small-ish, and then I'll do an occasional large piece.
Come out. The piece behind you, is that small or large?
That's about 36 by 36.
I know. Is that small or large?
That's just a mid-size
piece
for me. Yeah. But I don't think that there's, at least in my experience, I can't say that, oh, well, it's November, so New York is going to sell. It's April, so I'm going to see big sales in San Francisco. It has not worked like that in my experience. So,
and are there typical, is there a profile for a client that likes contemporary work, would you say?
They're Democrats.
We like to think, right? No, they're all, at least in my experience, they're all across the board. And a lot of it depends on the gallery. If there's a gallery that's working mostly, say, with consultants, then mostly the work is going to be going into private homes. And quite frankly, it's probably going to match somebody's sofa. But if a gallery has more contacts with museums or corporate curators, then the work is more likely to go into a museum collection or a corporate collection. So a lot of that really depends on not so much my work or even me, but on the particular gallery and the clients that they've been cultivating over time.
Okay.
Do you find out the names of the people who buy your art usually?
Some dealers, when they send me a check, write the collector's name and address.
Right.
So I have those. Others would be willing to tell me if I asked. And in fact, when they have openings and get-togethers, they always invite the collectors of the particular artist who's being shown. So there's no firewall there. It's all very, very back and forth. So I've not worked with any dealers who would not tell me, but I don't have a list of every work and every collector. But
okay.
But it would be available.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Laura, go ahead.
Yes. So this question is sort of for both of you. I don't know. Anyway, sorry, I've had a long day. How would you sort of discover or be able to piece out like whether a gallery is more focused on working with private collectors or more public places like museums or those sorts of institutions? And
go ahead, Joanne.
yeah.
Well,
I'll go if you want, but I have to think.
Well, I want to hear your answer too. But my sense is, first of all, there's a hierarchy of galleries. There are small emerging galleries, just as there are emerging artists, and there are galleries that continue up the ladder. The ones who have higher profile clients, who have more money. So you might have a mom and pop gallery right at the very bottom, not a qualitative, just a sort of a quantitative description, all the way up to, say, a Gagosian, where you cannot walk in off the street and buy something from Gagosian. He has to decide that, he and the artist have to decide that you're worthy of acquiring it. So I think you have to really look at the galleries. You have to follow them to get a sense of who they show, where they show. You can look at a resume, an artist's resume who shows with a particular gallery, and you can see where they are collected. And if that artist has been with that gallery for a while, and you see that there are a lot of, say, corporate or museum collections, you have a pretty good idea that they are really working on your behalf. And if there's a lot of private clients, then, they're probably working through decorators.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's sort of what I was thinking about, a way to figure it out. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Oh, but I want to hear Paul's answer, too.
Yeah, me too.
You're really in the middle of this, Paul.
I don't know. I think I'm not convinced that what Joanne's saying one can necessarily tell, and I think it's probably, I don't know that you can tell a priori before the fact. I think you can. I think you need to talk to. I mean, if you're interested in the gallery, you can ask them who most of their clients are. When you're having a discussion about, we really want to work with you, and your answer is, wow, I'm really flattered. Let me think about it for a couple of days. By the way, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Number one, do you pay your artists rather punctually? Number two, who do you sell to? And I think you could look at the gallery roster. No, Kyle, we're recording. They don't want to hear you. No. I have to bribe him. I think you could look at the gallery roster and see who doesn't show there anymore. And that's kind of a hard thing to figure out. But if, then you could talk to those people and get all kinds of information. You can talk to the people who show the gallery. I think what Joanne's saying, is a pretty good answer. I mean, we talked to, we kind of asked that question when we did, that was the summer. We did a webinar with Cheryl Haynes in San Francisco. And I think Cheryl said that 85% of her sales were to museums, and very few in the United States, and almost, not from walk-in traffic. But that it was important for her for credibility reasons to have a physical space. It also gave her artists, an opportunity to install and do things, but a lot of her work was outside of that. I think you can sort of sniff it out, from the way the gallery presents itself, where it advertises, what art fairs it does or doesn't do. But I think that's only getting a sense. And I think, what Joanne is saying and what I'm suggesting, ultimately talking to people who buy art from them. Because a lot of times, the higher the caliber of the gallery, the higher the caliber of the artist, the less likely they're going to put sales or, to individuals on their resume. It's mostly going to be, museum acquisitions or corporate, and then, that's the highest level. And then kind of corporate acquisitions or public collections and corporate public collections. But if you got enough museum shows, you don't put that stuff down anymore. And otherwise it's there, and then otherwise you're selling, to individuals who have names that people might recognize. And then individuals whose names people don't recognize. I feel like I sold, 70% of what I sold was to individuals directly. 25% was probably less, through art consultants, and a small percentage, under 10, to museums and things like that. But I'm kind of guessing. I'm thinking in terms of numbers. Does that answer your question enough?
Yeah, I think my question's been answered about 3 times over now, and I think that was...
All right, I'll shut up. Thank you. Calda, your turn. Go ahead.
One thing I would add is that when we go to galleries, part of what we're doing is simply enjoying the art, but there's another huge part of what we're doing is gathering information. And when you're looking at an artist's resume and you're getting a sense of where they've shown and who has collected them, you do try to kind of connect the dots. And as Paul said, you talk to people. And the other thing is you listen. The stuff that you hear when you're in a gallery is just an amazing thing. You hear them saying offhand that such and such museum is coming to pick up this work, such and such curator was in. You see it at the art fairs. It happens. And if you listen and you watch what's going on, you really can connect the dots a lot more easily.
One of the things that annoys me personally is how much time I spend reading labels in museums to see who donated the piece, who owns the piece, and when it was gifted to, it bothers me that I spend so much time doing that. We need to keep moving. Chalda, you had a question.
Hi, Joanne. We've been talking about museums, and I was reading about your museum acquisition in the New Britain Museum of Art. Yes. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how that came about. Did the museum go to a gallery and buy it from there? And the second part of the question is, what exactly does it have a tangible benefit to your career trajectory?
Oh, thank you. And now tell me how I pronounce your name.
Chalda.
Chalda. Chalda, this is an interesting question. Thank you for asking it. And it relates also to something that Paul asked earlier, which is, what does the blog do for you? Well, the person who acquired this work for the museum is a collector who focuses on acquiring and then donating. And this person wants to remain anonymous. I'll use the pronoun she because it is a female. She saw she became familiar with me through the blog, through my writing about the blog, then started following where I showed and following my work. And out of the blue, one day, I got an email from this collector saying, I like your blog, I like your work, I'm a collector, I would like to acquire something for the New Britain Museum of American Art. So, you know, so it was through the blog, first of all. She came to the studio. I showed her a lot of work. I told my dealer from Boston, because this was taking place in the Boston area, or in the New England area. So I told the dealer from Boston that this was going to happen, that the sale would take place through the gallery, but the collector was coming to the studio, and she selected a piece. And then once she made the selection, the paperwork was generated by the gallery, and you know, and so she made the selection. Whatever she did with the gallery, I'm not sure how it worked. Whether she wrote them a check, because they then were going to have to write a check to the dealer. So I guess she wrote them a check, and she has a relationship with them of some years standing. So they trust her judgment of art and artists. The work does have to go through an acquisitions committee meeting. And when it did, then all of that paperwork happened. So, you know, there are, I guess, more collectors and donors than we realize who are out there looking in ways that we're not even aware of until somebody contacts you. So at some point it will be up at the museum as part of their new acquisitions.
That's a cool experience. Thank you both.
Yeah.
We're starting to run out of time. There were more people who had questions whose hands went down. Oops, there they go back up. Let's go to Rita. Hi, Rita.
Hi. Thank you, Joanne, for sharing with us. I was looking at your blog yesterday, and I really, really enjoy the way that you write. I find it really interesting, and I'm a former New Yorker. Love what you wrote, everything, and pictures of Brooklyn are really moving. I do have a question, though. This is really for both you and Paul. What do you think about, or what do you see the role of nonprofit galleries? Not art centers, you know, not the places that have classes so much, but truly kind of nonprofit galleries like Spaces in Cleveland, places that are more cutting edge. Do you see a role for artists, and at what point in their career do you think that's a viable role where it would be a stepping stone to the next place?
Well, I think, you know, I think they're fantastic places, and you have really dedicated administrators working in nonprofit venues. There are artists, Rita, who do work that is absolutely not commercially viable. And so for those artists, nonprofits are a lifeline, because they get to show and be visible and to engage in the dialogue with the public and, you know, with the critical public and with an art community without having to be focused on, will this sell, you know, making money from that particular exhibition is not the point. It's to show the work. There are artists who are working 9 to 5, for instance, who have plenty of benefits and time off, and they don't need to sell their art, but they need to make it and they need to show it, and so for them, you know, it's a lifeline. For emerging artists, nonprofits are a lifeline. I think, you know, the service they do to the community, it's just a huge mitzvah to all of us.
I think there's something to be said for being able to see art that's presented with different agendas or lacks thereof. You know, and if an art gallery is showing it, in theory at least, it's, you know, it's got some commercial potential, or that, you know, that's why they do it. But, you know, even when I had a gallery, there were exhibits that I would do where there was nothing for sale. And there was just, you know, I mean, like I had one artist who, it was just gorgeous, covered one whole wall of the gallery with tar and the opposite wall with melted white wax. And then there were these floating fins coming down from the ceiling and levitating like an inch off the floor. It was amazing. I thought it was just a great show. You know, but some of that was just to get me some attention. I mean, there's, you know, an ulterior motive was to show, I mean, maybe the not ulterior motive was to show an artist whose work I really respected and didn't think anybody else was going to, that I really loved. The other thing is that somebody would look at me and go, Klein, that's really risky. What are you doing? You know, and, you know, I would get a whole lot of attention for doing an exhibit where things weren't, or nothing was for sale. So there's something to be said for that. But that's not the same motivation, excuse me, that a not-for-profit or an alternative gallery like you're talking about does. I think all these galleries serve a nice function and help exposure of the artwork and establish a critical dialogue that isn't only about commerciality. And I think in Chicago you have a proliferation of apartment galleries or galleries by, you know, art school students or people who are recently out and they want to do something and test their feet. You know, and some of them get the disease and end up becoming a full-grown gallery. And some of them just exist for a couple of years and I think are performing, you know, a nice service for getting their friends exposure and experience. And then you've got, you know, the galleries that are much more purely an alternative space and or smaller institutional galleries. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit in another webinar. But I think that there's, you know, a nice purpose there of showing something that hopefully contributes to the dialogue. You know, Joanne said one of the reasons she writes and is out there and doing these kinds of things is to be an integral part of the dialogue. And I think there's lots of different ways one can do that. So I think all those, you know, serve that kind of purpose. Did that answer your question? That was Rita, wasn't it? Rita.
Yes, that was me. That answered the question. Thank you.
Yeah, and, you know, I would just jump in with one other thought, which is, you know, in New York, I noticed, for instance, that co-op galleries are sort of looked down upon. But there are other parts of the country, now in Boston, for instance, where there are about 4 co-op galleries in the same area with all the commercial galleries. On a first Friday opening, most gallery goers are not making a distinction between, oh, this is co-op, this is commercial, this is what. They just go and they make the rounds and they enjoy the art. And the critics in Boston also don't make a distinction. They're really considering the work that they see. So depending on your city, you can be involved in nonprofits and have a, you know, rich, full exhibition life. And academic galleries as well, where you have, you know, perhaps an opportunity to do some teaching there, or be a visiting artist. Maybe they cover a catalog, you know. But I think that these are great opportunities.
And this is a good moment to wrap this up. You know, in a previous webinar, gosh, it was a year and a half ago, Dana Martin Davis commented about how there really isn't an art world, but there's a lot of art villages. You know, and I think Joanne has taken us through a tour of a couple of art villages that of which she's a native. And I guess in the art world you can be a native of more than one, you know, different art village. You've got, you know, you need to figure out what works for you and how to navigate your path and then mine it, you know, so that Joanne's comfortable not being part of the Twitter art village, but is comfortable in the Facebook art village and working with, you know, an array of galleries in New York, which is a different model than most people do. And it works nicely for her. And I think, you know, the moral of the story, besides the fact that we agree on so many things and even use the same analogies, you know, is that each of you need to find out what resonates for you. And, you know, you can follow Joanne's example to as much an extent as it's comfortable for you, but you need to do what's right for you, you know, as does she, as do I. So I think it's been really good and really insightful, Joanne, with those different kinds of examples. I appreciate it very much. And I'm unmuting everybody so that we can all echo that thought. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Really lovely. And I wish you all the absolute very best with your careers. It's a hard road, but, you know, we do it and it brings us pleasure.
Joanne, thanks again.
Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you.
Thank you.